want to know what you're fighting for. Podcast for George. 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 Oh, yeah.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome on in to another podcast by George. One of the best parts of the podcast really is that I get to, talk about things that interest me. And I saw something just recently that kind of leapt off the pages of the hometown paper. And I wanted to talk to this with a guy that knows all about it. And it's Pete Evans. He's an assistant professor up at Iowa State University. He's a registered architect, and he's assistant professor in the Department of Industrial Design at Iowa State University, teaching CAD, CAM, and design technology courses. He's also coordinator for the Forward Learning Experience, and we're going to talk about all of that and talk about this. It's a 3D concrete printer. Let me welcome our guest in, and then I'm going to bring this article up and we'll talk through it. Pete Evans, welcome to a podcast by George.
Hi, George. Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, particularly on such short notice. But I've always been interested in this, Pete. Before I show this article, I remember when everybody started talking about 3D printing, and I looked at it and I thought, well, okay, it's plastic stuff, and they're making toys and knickknacks with it, and it looks kind of like thermal molding or something, and I wasn't that impressed with it. But I mean, what it is today compared to when it was first unveiled, and really my understanding of it has grown. 3D printing really doesn't have much to do with printing at all in the traditional context, but it's a kind of like a building something with layers. If you've got a material that is malleable and or can be kind of liquefied or something like that, you can make something with a 3D printer. Is that kind of a layman's understanding of it?
Yes, exactly. And you mentioned the outreach work we do, and I can remember those early days. We had a little video that we would show at some outreach events, and it would be even using 3D printing to make food. So pasta, they were making vehicles even. So vehicle bodies, there's a company in the country, National Motors, I think is the name, if I recall. But it's definitely advanced, and we're at a point where the scale of the technologies to put this together have allowed us to really begin that industry here in the United States. We really just started, I think, last year, maybe 2019, but there's about I'd say about half a dozen companies in the United States that have started working with housing and concrete 3D printing machines.
Yeah, I mean, it's really advanced so much so I've read a little bit not too long ago about the medical profession. I mean, we're talking human tissue, anything that can be, like I said, that's malleable or is kind of in this liquefied state can be created and built upon. They're talking about making human organs with 3D printers. It's really amazing. But what we're going to be talking about today is home building and construction. Let me build this up, bring this up on screen. And this will be kind of our jumping off point for people that didn't see this article. Iowa State University gets $1.4 million to buy a 3D concrete printer for low-cost home building. That's very interesting to me also. Iowa's first 3D printed home could be ready for its new owners by this time next year. The Iowa Economic Development Authority on Friday approved $1.4 million for the Iowa State University College of Design that Pete's working with there to purchase a 3D printer capable of producing concrete houses. Its goal is to build a neighborhood of up to 34 3D printed homes in Hamburg, a southwest Iowa town recovering from a massive flood 2 years ago. People remember when it was all over the news. I also remember going way back in the day, I think it was about wiped off the map in a tornado. Those folks probably need some homes. The agency's director, Debbie Durham, said the college also will develop a curriculum for training contractors on 3D printing and new state building codes in order to allow wide use of the technique in Iowa. And here we're seeing some examples of some basic home design construction here. That's down in Austin, Texas. And here we're going to get to our guest today. Pete Evans, assistant professor of industrial design at Iowa State University, said 3D printed homes offer significant cost savings because they can be finished in a week or two. Now, there's much more benefit to this than just the cost savings, but maybe you can start by just talking about that some.
So we're absolutely excited about this project because we're going to apply a comprehensive look at this new technology to really understand what the cost savings might be. There's a lot of claims out there, and depending, I think, on the local conditions. So we're going to be looking at where that material is available, how we can get that machine transported to site, how long it'll actually take to set up and run, move that machine off site, a lot of different functions and factors, code factors, approval factors to use this new technology, because this is not a typical stick-built construction, and see what the actual numbers are for savings. There are claims out there that it could be 2 to 3 times as much. And when you hear numbers, it's certainly something that sounds pretty awesome, but we want to see if that's just for that particular part of the home building itself, or if it's something that we can extrapolate by leveraging other offsite manufacturing techniques, modular techniques, different systems to really keep that acceleration and that on-site time down, so that we can really see some cost savings in some different ways. And also looking at energy, looking at that longevity of the house, the resiliency, the structural integrity, the energy components, all of those will be pieces that'll be a part of that affordability.
Well, Pete's a great guy to talk about this because he's an architect. And as I mentioned, the machine, the device that we're talking about here is a 3D concrete printer. And Pete, a lot of people would think, oh, okay, this is going to be a glorified mud hut made out of concrete. But the potential for this is truly amazing. I mean, this can be aesthetically pleasing as it is energy efficient, as an example.
Absolutely. One of the opportunities that we're really excited about, and I think this is going to be something we'll all have to look at, is we can make this look contextual. So it can fit into a stick-built neighborhood, where it's sitting next to traditional residential homes. If that is the desire, it also has the opportunity, because it's an entirely different material process. We can start to develop a new vocabulary or find some new opportunities to really push the extents of that technology and find new ways to build and realize home. And I think that's going to be exciting.
When we talk about concrete, for the shell, for the structure, for the building itself, but it doesn't need to stop there. I mean, if you're using 3D printing, a lot of things in a home could be coming out of a 3D printer.
This is true. It could extend further. We have landscape architects involved, planners involved, industrial designers involved, architects involved. This could be throughout the house and around the property in a number of ways. And we're really excited to have the opportunity to look at those pieces. It's something that is, I think, if we look at it just through the lens of 3D printing, it might be a little bit confining just through these walls that right now is I'd say the prominent technique to use this technology. I think we'll try to look for new opportunities as well.
A concrete built home. I know a lot of my listeners, we just did a big show on the derecho that went through. Talked to somebody from Iowa State University about that, actually. And some folks probably, and Hamburg would be a good example of this, are going to like the resiliency part of it that you talked about, the fact that it can resist weather extremes, these derechos, these storms, maybe even flooding. Would a home like this be more resistant to flooding for some reason?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to speak to the finishes too. There's been a pretty long string of issues with the longevity and the healthiness, the health factors for indoor air quality and other things. And that's been a part of our existing structure that we've been working around. So being able to have a resilient material, that I might make the analogy to concrete block construction, as well as just generally site cast construction, it's going to be able to resist things and withstand events that we're starting to really face more. The derecho is a great example. One of the things we're going to study, and this new material, this new process is going to require new codes and new compliance, and impact resistance is one of those functions and
Oh,
factors.
yeah.
So, automatically we'll be starting to have a safe space that might be within a neighborhood as a public building, or it could be everybody's own residence that has a part of their structure as this resilient space, or even we were talking to one of the contractors, a watermark, so that up to a certain point, maybe that part is the concrete construction, and then you can start to change the dynamic of the aesthetic or the technology you're working with. So those are opportunities that I think are really important for us to evaluate for the energy, for the resiliency, for the affordability.
I mentioned that you're an architect. One thing that I thought about when I saw this, it's almost a standing joke anymore about how the homeowner is always at odds with the architect, the designer, the contractor, and the builder, that they just don't seem to be satisfied. It just doesn't fit their mind's eye. They don't get what they envisioned when they first talked about their once in a lifetime home. But this computer printing thing has the potential to deliver preciseness and exactness that might improve that entire process. Would you agree with that?
I do, and one of the important factors that I think you're leading into is that, again, we're not just looking at this as a single technology. One of the technologies we're going to bring is advanced web technologies, the ability, like people are used to with IKEA, for instance, to be able to envision their kitchen and order their kitchen. That preciseness and also that understanding of control or opportunity is something that we're going to try to work with. We're also using and leveraging virtual reality and telepresence so that the owner can really truly get a feel of working and being in their residence, so they can see it, feel it, and experience what that should be like. So those are important pieces that exist today alongside the 3D printing technology. The construction printing is super important. Being able to provide the owner with best practices and maybe some agency, the ability to make choices up front. And this process is so fast that they'll be able to work on the choices, the financing, the articulation of the spaces, what goes in a different way than we do today.
I like it. I mean, it saves time, it saves money, it has the potential to be more environmentally friendly. I would think that it has the potential also to be using some recycled building materials that aren't currently being used. It's really exciting. I'll tell you one angle of this that I was interested in. I would assume that your folks have considered this, but it has to do with the homelessness situation. Building affordable, quickly constructed homes for homeless folks. One of the biggest obstacles has always been the cost for municipalities and governments and states and that type of thing. Has that been talked about?
So I would say our target is definitely affordable housing with this grant, and trying to understand that technology and realize some of those cost factors is really important. Because again, there's a lot of claims out there, and how we do that here in Iowa is important. I think this is going to scale to being able to address homelessness. I think it can scale all the way upward to the other end of the spectrum as well. And we're going to start in that important area of affordable housing, because that's really one of the needs that impacts workforce. It impacts quality of life. It impacts our communities, rural and potentially urban. But here in Iowa, I think that's our first target of opportunity. And I applaud working with IEDA. I think that vision has enabled us to get here and introduce that as a applied research project where we can make it happen. And then working with private industry as well. I think the state will have a place to play in that space, being able to leverage it for homeless housing if we need to, transition housing, disaster recovery housing. Those are all really quick, low hanging fruit. And absolutely, this is something that I think we'll be able to leverage.
So disaster recovery. So if a string of derecho like tornadoes go through and wipe out a community like they have in the past, this has the potential to be able to put up housing very quickly, very efficiently, very low cost. That could be temporary or permanent for those people that are trying to get back on their feet. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is part of a solution. And again, there's no one shoe fits all. We're working and looking at modular systems, prefabricated systems, and that needs to be in concert with this new technology as it arrives, so that if there is a disaster recovery event in a community, that community can be a part of understanding what that solution means for temporary to permanent. Being able to have that transition and that voice, I think, is going to be important. But it is, like you're suggesting, something that we're going to be able to address rapidly in a way that we haven't been able to do before.
Well, podcast by George. Our big three people we talk about on my show all the time is climate, war, and healthcare. Those are the three things that I'm really dialed into, and maybe the climate more than anything. I really like beginning and ending every conversation when it comes to climate. I want you here as we go out, because Pete's got to run off to do some other things here, but I wanted you to talk briefly about the environmental element of this. A concrete home, for instance, why it literally stands to be more environmentally friendly. And then also, anybody that's ever been on a job site or gone by home construction can see the building material waste that's created in the construction of a home. And that's another big benefit of this as far as pollution is concerned. Talk about those things.
So again, this is not just a singular dimensional problem, and one of the things that we describe when I like your kind of threefold bottom line, we look at it another way sometimes when we talk about products or projects, triple bottom line, and people, economy, and community, I think are a few of those pieces, and it can be many different ways to understand it, but concrete in itself is not an answer. It is not the most sustainable material, but it is in how we use it, when we use it, and why. I think also looking at ways that we can mix particular local materials into that. There's conversations about hempcrete. There's conversations about mixing this up with some of our other agricultural byproducts. And I look forward to really trying to dig into those pieces, because it's a local answer to that problem that we really have to get to, so that what's right again in one corner of Iowa might be different than another corner. So flooding derecho and all other things aside, the sustainability comes from creating something that's high quality, livable space for somebody that it's their potential dream home, potentially the place they stay in for their life, or something that can transition well and have a good footprint in our environment. So whether it's a single family house or something that scales up to a mass modular type of multifamily urban context solution, this is one of the major technologies that's right on the edge of really disrupting the market. So we're going to take a critical look at it, understand the ecosystem, the alternatives that are coming on board, and make sure that we have a system that supports all of those possibilities.
Well, that's great. Again, really appreciate him coming on the show. Pete, here as we wrap up, if you want to give us a little closer here, maybe a little timeline, or maybe a URL or web address where people can follow along and kind of see the progress of this project, what do you tell folks?
Gosh, I would say this is an all hands on deck problem that we have an opportunity to deal with. We have some great partners that we're starting this with. Brunau Construction down in Southwest Iowa is going to work with us to realize this. And at the same time, we're working with Iowa Central Community College. This is a synergy that we're really excited about. And again, it's about understanding these disruptive forces and trying to make it work the best for Iowa and our workforce, our communities, and our state. So it's an exciting problem to have, an opportunity to take a crack at. And we're not on a website yet. I would say just stay tuned. If you have questions, please reach out to us, and we'd be excited to bring you into the conversation. There are more answers and ideas than we can come up with that are important to be able to consider. And this is, again, it's not committee designed by committee. That's not always successful. However, it is something that we need the community to be involved in having that voice is important. Being able to localize this, being able to make the right solution for Iowa is really at the utmost importance for how we get there. So thanks for the opportunity. And as we move forward, I hope we can have another conversation as this develops and maybe hits the ground.
Well, yeah, Podcast by George wants to be a part of this. Put us on your mailing list, Pete. I'll keep people informed as best I can. Thanks for coming on this special edition of Podcast by George.
Thank you, George, as well. And happy holidays to you and all your viewers and all involved.
That's for sure. Folks, that's Pete Evans. He's an assistant professor up at Iowa State University. He's a registered architect, and he's assistant professor in the Department of Industrial Design. And he's also a coordinator for the Forward Learning Experience, and he's going to be working with a 3D concrete printer up there and maybe, changing the world a little bit when it comes to the home building industry. And folks, if you like Podcast by George, if you like this kind of cutting edge coverage, please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, ring that notification bell on YouTube so that you find out about upcoming episodes. You can get us on iTunes and Spotify and the iHeartRadio app and all the places where podcasts are seen or heard. But that's going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is, and there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.